Welcome to the Bandano Podcast, where we're calling a spade a spade. Great to be here with you guys today. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. There's no CBA deal. The players don't want to agree to what the owners are proposing. Perfect. Grab Asia Wilson, grab Sabrina, grab Sophie, grab the superstar, the main attraction, Caitlin Clark, and let's start this league fresh.
This isn't just dramatic language. This isn't some clickbait headline designed to grab attention. This is a genuine possibility floating around right now while the WNBA and its Players Association sit completely stuck without any collective bargaining agreement locked in. The league just dropped a moratorium on everything business-related. Free agency? Completely frozen solid. Contract talks? Dead in the water. And this gap between what ownership wants and what players demand has become so toxic that people are legitimately throwing around the idea of scrapping everything and building from scratch.
People wouldn't notice the difference. Nobody would say to themselves, oh, wow, the talent has really dropped off this year. Nobody's going to be saying that. In fact, they'll be saying, wow, it's real calm this season. There's not so much complaining and whining going on this season. Start fresh with players that deserve money and with players that can push the league forward.
So here's why this exact moment matters so much. That previous CBA died on Friday. Both sides couldn't find any common ground for extending it. They're stuck in this weird status quo situation where technically the old rules still exist, but absolutely nobody can actually do business. Teams were ready to send out qualifying offers to free agents using the expired deal. But players flat out refused to sign a single thing while this new salary structure with these huge pay bumps is still being hammered out. We're talking about 84 out of 86 veterans who are all sitting there as free agents, every single one waiting for a fresh CBA before they'll even think about signing. The real problem? Revenue sharing. Ownership put an offer on the table to bump the players' cut from 9% all the way up to 50%. The players are pushing for 30% of revenue before any expenses get taken out. That difference we're talking about, hundreds of millions of dollars across whatever deal they eventually sign.
Let me know what you guys think in the comments section below. Like the video and subscribe. These players are so committed to the downfall of their own league. They've tried forever to get noticed by the mainstream. In comes Caitlin Clark. Finally, they get noticed. They've tried so long to get paid what they think that they're owed. In comes Caitlin Clark. Owners actually see someone that can make them dollar signs and they say, you know what? We'll compromise with you.
All right, so let's break down what actually shifted to give players this kind of power. For 27 straight years, the WNBA bled money. You had decent, but nothing special, attendance. TV ratings that barely showed up on anyone's radar. Corporate sponsors were pretty much nowhere to be found. The whole league stayed alive because NBA owners kept writing checks as this feel-good investment and hoping maybe someday it would pay off. Then April 2024 happened, and Caitlin Clark showed up. The Indiana Fever jumped from 4,167 fans per home game in 2023 to selling out literally every single home game in 2024. When they traveled, sellouts, everywhere they went, TV numbers went absolutely insane. That Fever versus Las Vegas Aces game on July 2nd pulled in 2.3 million viewers on ESPN. That was the biggest WNBA audience in 23 years. Corporate money that had never even looked at women's basketball started pouring in. Nike, State Farm, Gatorade, Wilson, everyone wanted a piece.
But the players believe that they're entitled to more money. The old guard fans have brainwashed them into thinking that they are entitled into more money.
Now this is exactly where all the tensions started building up. Owners saw those numbers and witnessed something they'd never experienced before. Real profit potential. Not some distant future maybe. Right now, today, profit. So they showed up to negotiations, ready to make deals they'd never considered before. Max contracts, shooting past $1 million, average salaries climbing over $500,000, minimum salaries hitting $250,000. Charter flights for everybody, upgraded hotels, way better benefits across the board. Looking at WNBA history, this represents a massive jump forward. The average WNBA salary in 2023 sat around $113,000. What ownership proposed would multiply that by more than 4 times.
WNBA and Women's National Basketball Players Association have reached an agreement on a moratorium for league business, sources told ESPN on Monday. The moratorium is necessary because the sides failed to reach an agreement on a new collective bargaining agreement or an extension of the previous one by Friday's deadline. The sides continue to negotiate on a new CBA amid what's become a bitter impasse as they work toward what both sides acknowledge will be a transformative deal. They remain far apart on several key issues, including chiefly what a revenue sharing system should look like. Now, is it really bitter on the owner side? Probably not. They think they're going above and beyond with some of the things that they're willing to give them.
But the Players Association is pushing back with this argument. They're saying these revenue numbers are basically built entirely around Caitlin Clark's ability to draw crowds. And if one single player is creating that much financial value, then every player deserves a bigger slice because the league markets everyone as one unified product. They're pointing at the NBA, where players get 50% of basketball-related income. They're looking at the NWSL, where soccer players fought their way up to 50%. Their question is, why should basketball players settle for 15% when every other major professional league hands athletes at least 40%? Ownership fires back that the WNBA still carries these huge overhead costs. Expansion fees, new arenas, infrastructure investments. They're arguing that giving away 30% of revenue before covering expenses would completely destroy half the teams in the league, especially those smaller market franchises that don't have their own Caitlin Clark.
The players are bitter because they think that they're owed something that they haven't earned. The players are bitter. The players have things to lose. Well, not all of the players, but the players in the negotiating rooms. Breanna Stewart and Reese Collier. They would love it if WNBA folds. Unrivaled gets some players. Maybe that league turns to 5-on-5. They already see a future for Unrivaled. Breanna Stewart earlier this weekend said, oh man, it's so hard to compartmentalize. I mean, after the games, then I got to go and take emails and phone calls and take places on this and take places on that. Wouldn't it just be easier if that league didn't exist anymore? That's what she's saying to herself.
And this bitterness we're seeing, it goes way beyond just money now. Players Association President Nneka Ogwumike and Vice President Breanna Stewart have been all over social media, talking about feeling completely disrespected by what ownership offered. They've turned this into a bigger story about the league's long history of not properly valuing its athletes. Multiple veteran players have done interviews suggesting owners are trying to cash in on Caitlin Clark's popularity without fairly paying the players who spent years building the foundation she's now standing on. Meanwhile, ownership sources have been leaking to reporters that they feel players are negotiating in completely bad faith. That the association keeps making demands they absolutely know can't be met. Maybe because some of the leadership has money tied up in competing leagues. Breanna Stewart helped start Unrivaled, this new 3-on-3 league that's paying top players way more money for a way shorter season. Some owners are quietly wondering if Stewart actually wants the WNBA to collapse, so Unrivaled becomes the main women's basketball product.
Expected massive increases in compensation is still being bargained. All but 2 of the league's veterans and free agents this offseason in anticipation of a new CBA. The moratorium will halt those initial stages of free agency in which teams would seek to deliver qualifying offers and core designations to players. Just start fresh. Just start fresh. Call up Caitlin Clark and say, hey, Cece, we're moving on. You want to play in the WNBA? You could be our first player. Call Sophie. Hey, Sophie, you want to come play in the WNBA? You'll be our first player. What are the steps to just tear that up and start new? Seriously, fans won't care. Let me rephrase. The fans that actually move the needle won't care.
This moratorium situation is actually a big deal. Under normal circumstances, free agency would have kicked off on January 21st. Teams would be making offers left and right. Players would be putting signatures on contracts. Instead, everything is completely locked up. The Chicago Sky can't talk to free agents. The Los Angeles Sparks can't send out qualifying offers. Players who were planning team switches are stuck with nowhere to go, and the timing makes this even more problematic. Training camps are supposed to launch in early May. The season is scheduled to start tipping off in mid-May. If there's no CBA deal by mid-March, teams won't have enough time to put rosters together. If negotiations stretch into April, the entire season could be in serious trouble. The League and Players Association did agree to extend this moratorium, which at least keeps everyone talking. But sources from both sides are describing these negotiations as tense and going absolutely nowhere. The gap between what each side wants hasn't gotten any smaller in weeks.
At this point, many of those folks are saying, just lock them out. End this nonsense. Shut this league down. We are officially at the point where this bargaining and negotiating, it's turned into a pileup on the side of the road that people are now paying attention to. They don't really have an invested interest in it. They're just paying attention to because it's a pileup on the side of the road. This league is it's losing steam. It's losing steam by the day. If interest levels were here when Caitlin Clark got here, dude, they're here. They might even be off the screen now. If interest levels were here when Caitlin Clark arrived, they've fallen off so fast. People don't even want to watch anything that doesn't have to do with Caitlin Clark. No one cares about Unrivaled. No one cared about the playoffs. No one cared about the finals. Oh, but the ratings. Yeah, but the ratings were inflated. Nobody paid attention. You look at Caitlin Clark games, you look at Indiana Fever games, and you look at non-Caitlin Clark games. There it is. Said it. Right there. So the league has lost momentum, and it's all because of the players. Unwillingness to negotiate. Unwillingness to compromise. The owners have done their part. And as far as I'm concerned, move on without the old guard. Hire whatever attorney you can to make that possible and just do it. If not, shut it down and spare us the song.
So let's really dig into this nuclear option because it's actually not as insane as it sounds when you first hear it. The legal structure for using replacement players totally exists when negotiations fall apart in professional sports. Management can declare an impasse and just implement their final offer. Players can go on strike. Owners can lock everyone out, and if the union won't accept the terms, ownership can hire replacement workers to keep operations running. This happened in the NFL back in players went on strike. Owners brought in replacements. They played 3 full weeks with substitute players before the union gave up and took management's offer. Same thing in Major League Baseball in 1995 when owners used replacement players during spring training until a court stopped them. Could this actually work in the WNBA? In theory, absolutely. The league could offer Caitlin Clark, Sabrina Ionescu, Paige Buchers, and a few other big names way above market contracts, then fill out the rest with replacement players, overseas professionals, former college stars who didn't make WNBA rosters, players from other leagues willing to cross picket lines. Would fans notice the talent difference? Obviously, the quality of play would drop significantly. But here's the calculation ownership would be making. Do casual fans, who only started watching because of Caitlin Clark, actually care about the difference between a veteran WNBA rotation player and a replacement-level athlete? Or do they just want to watch Caitlin Clark play basketball? The TV ratings suggest they might not care as much as you'd expect. When the Fever played without injured stars, their viewership still crushed every other game on the schedule. When Caitlin Clark sat out fourth quarters of blowouts, viewers just turned off their TV. The data shows a huge chunk of the new audience is there for specific players, not the league itself. Now, would this strategy actually work long-term? Almost definitely not. It would be a public relations nightmare. The Players Association would file unfair labor practice charges. Sponsors might bail rather than get tied to a labor dispute. Fans who actually care about women's basketball as a sport, not just entertainment, would lose their minds. But short-term, as a negotiating move, it creates real leverage. Because just the threat might be enough to get the Players Association back to the table with something more realistic. If ownership can make a believable argument that they're willing to run with replacement players rather than accept 30% revenue sharing, that completely changes how this negotiation works. And here's the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to admit out loud. The leverage in this negotiation isn't split evenly. The Players Association is acting like they have equal bargaining power, but they absolutely don't. 5 players probably account for 75% of the league's current revenue growth. The other 95 players have way less individual leverage. If you're Caitlin Clark, you could walk away from the WNBA tomorrow and sign with Unrivaled or a European league for more money. If you're Breanna Stewart, same situation, but if you're a role player making league minimum, you need the WNBA way more than it needs youth. That's the brutal economic reality. And it's why some people think the Players Association might have pushed too hard by demanding 30%. Because if owners call that bluff and implement their 15% offer, what's the union's next move? Lock yourselves out of the only major professional women's basketball league in North America. The momentum this league built in 2024 is already starting to fade. Nobody watched the playoffs with the same intensity they brought to the regular season. Unrivaled is getting some attention, but nothing close to what the WNBA created during the Fever's run. The longer this negotiation drags out, the more casual fans drift away. And that's what makes this moment so critical. The WNBA has this window right now where it can capitalize on interest that's never existed before. But that window is closing fast. Every week without a resolution is another week where fans forget that. Every month without games is another month where corporate sponsors start questioning their investments. So who gives in first? Do players accept something closer to what ownership offered and lock in life-changing money for the next decade? Or do they stick with 30% and risk a work stoppage that could destroy everything they've built? Because here's what everyone needs to understand. This goes way beyond just money. This is about whether the WNBA can actually sustain itself as a real business. And right now, with no CBA, no free agency, and no clear path forward, that question doesn't have any good answers. The league that finally broke through to mainstream America might be about to break itself apart.